All right, good morning, everyone. And I'll also say good afternoon because I know we've got some folks from across the pond who are attending this as well. We're excited to have you and excited to talk through what we have to cover today. We're going to be talking about our 2024 manufacturers digital commerce benchmarking study, as well as what the leaders in the space are getting right around PXM and what some are getting wrong. So we'll be spending, about 30 to 40 minutes this morning on content. We've got plenty of time for Q&A or to, let you get an early start on lunch or whatever you're going to be headed towards afterwards. But my name is Andy Didyk. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Ntara. I have a really fun job. I get to talk to new clients. I get to travel all over the country and all over the world to meet with them, as well as to manage a really incredible team of folks that help to do consulting around PXM and other things. We'll introduce our companies in just a moment, but I know that some of you have seen some of this content before, but you haven't gotten a chance to get the reaction from Stephen Kaufman. I'm really pleased that he's able to join us this morning. He's the Chief Product Officer at inriver, and I'll allow him to introduce himself and get a little bit of perspective on his background before we move forward with our agenda. Stephen?
Sure. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, as you mentioned, the Chief Product Officer at inriver. I've just cleared my 1 year anniversary without any scrapes and bruises that are too bad. I've been in SaaS actually for about 25 years, actually a little before it was called SaaS, which is called cloud computing. My background has really been with digital asset management. I've invented a couple of systems and done some startups. And then I've worked with workflow, which is really coming into its own in the PIM market, automation and workflow, coupled with AI. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I've served both as CTO and CPO in both startups and some corporate environments over the years. So really glad to join you today, Andy. And one thing you mentioned, being in front of customers, I know you and I have actually personally done some together recently. That's really what we love doing. I think you and I share that.
Absolutely. We're glad you're here, and thank you for joining us to bring perspective from the technology side, both with PIM and DAM, as well as the client experiences that we've shared together and then had separately. To that end, let me hit the agenda real quickly for those who are attending. So we're going to be covering the latest insights we have from our PXM research, our manufacturing benchmark study that we'll talk about in just a moment. I'll say up front, I know some who have registered today were able to catch the presentation where we debuted this research live to the world, either at PIMpoint North America in Chicago or at PIMpoint Europe in Malmo, Sweden. And if you've seen that, we're really glad you're still here because we have some new insights to share today, some new slices of the data, and of course, getting Stephen's perspective and reaction, as well as we'll be sharing some reactions that manufacturers, both our clients and then just folks in the industry have shared with us in response to this research, because it's actually been able to generate quite a bit of noise, and we've gotten some neat reactions we'd like to talk through and share with the group about what we're learning as we go. We will talk about what's separating high and low performers in the PIM space. We've got one cool trick regarding PIM ROI. That's a false promise. I was taught in PowerPoint school to lead with a false promise. No, I'm kidding. You're not. But we're going to talk about ROI and ROI of PIM and DAM platforms with some topics that frankly were a little bit, some of them are in the research report that's been submitted, some are not. And some challenges that folks are having around getting ROI or realizing ROI out of PIM and DAM, what the causes of those challenges are and what can be done about those. And then also we're going to share some exciting examples about Gen AI in the real world, going beyond some of the mundane things that we've seen. We're going to share a client example that's doing some things that are really, really cool and leading in the space in regards to selling and marketing products that we'd love to be able to share with all of you. So that is the agenda for this morning, and with that, we'll jump right into it. As I mentioned, I know some of you are familiar with us, some of us are not. I will keep this introduction short. I know Stephen's committed to the same. I work for a company called Ntara. We are an independent systems integrator. We're well known in the product experience management space. So consulting and deployments around PIM, DAM, e-commerce, and omni-channel strategies. Work with a lot of manufacturers and distributors, suppliers who are dealing with this omni-channel challenge in the world. However, what a lot of folks don't know is we also have an extensive research practice. We've built a proprietary research methodology over the past 20 plus years. Those are just some of the clients that we have listed here, that we've done everything from help with global go-to-market strategy for Xerox for all their B2B businesses, to helping to improve access to pediatric care during the pandemic for Johns Hopkins, and then everything in between, lots of manufacturers and others. So our research practice is not limited just to manufacturing or distribution in scope. It's applicable across industries, and I'm excited to share with you some of the outcomes of that research today. I'll turn things over to Stephen to talk a little bit about inriver and give a brief introduction as well.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. So as you can see from the infographic, inriver is a PIM provider that transitioned to being 100% SaaS in 2017. We went to the cloud and then dropped our on-prem support in 2021. There are a couple stragglers out there, but we are a SaaS provider. A couple of the highlights here. One is a very robust API platform using REST APIs. As you see, 50 million requests every working day. We are owned by THL, which is a Boston-based private equity firm. They also own some other properties in the space, notably they own Binder, an ISV in our space that many of us already know about and work with quite a lot. Geographically, we are about 1/3 US and Canada. I would say the company being started in the Nordics. I had a lot of, I would say, small to medium accounts in the Nordics through about 2020, but our North American and our enterprise work has picked up substantially since then. And then at the bottom, you can see complementary ISVs. Obviously, in PIM, you have to syndicate well to the largest suppliers, so you see some of those there. And then not coincidentally, you'll see our system integrators at the bottom with Ntara in the center. And I'll leave it at that, and we'll move forward.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, so the source of our insights today is the 2024 U.S. Manufacturers Digital Commerce Benchmarking Study. We got as many syllables in the title as we could, but we created this study. This is our 25th anniversary at Ntara, our 25th year in business. I've been here for 17 years. It's been a very dynamic company to be a part of. And in our 25th year, we decided, let's take this great research practice we have and turn it towards the industry that we work for and help provide insights, not just for one company, but for all of the companies that participate in the PXM space, whether you are in e-commerce or PIM or DAM, or just trying to figure out, how do I handle the multi-channel challenge that I have in getting my product information consistent and my product experience consistent across all of the channels that I have. So this study is what this is based off of. There is a link at the end of this. It's free to download. We'd love to get it in as many hands as possible. And I'm going to take a couple minutes and just go over the demographics of the study and what it uncovered before we get into the insights and some of Stephen's reactions. So this study was sponsored by inriver, and it's important to note that inriver provided the means for us to get this study built and out to the market, but it is a technology agnostic study. So it covers all kinds of different platforms, all kinds of different DAM platforms, and everything in between, as you'll see in just a moment. So we remained independent with this observational study during the entire time. Okay, so couple of quick things about the results of the study. There are 158 unique companies that are represented here, about 500 individual responses. Those companies total about $26 billion in annual revenue. So this is a big chunk representative sample of the market. And because of the way that survey was done, there are over 9,000 individual data points that we could push and pull from, which is why we're able to continually generate new insights as we go through the study. It was an observational study. It wasn't double-blind or randomized. So for you research geeks out there, I need to have that disclaimer there, that we're looking at what the data suggest. But I think what's been cool is, since we've published this study in Q2, to be able to have gone to seen so many clients, interacted with so many of you on the road, it's really validated some of the study's findings as well. So a quick look at who responded. This is a manufacturer study. We define manufacturers as a company that produces physical goods, either finished goods or components, finished components, and that is typically selling through multiple channels. We had about 37% of respondents come from the industrial sector and 60% of those who are targeting consumer. And as I shared from the stage before, consumers, companies don't want to be called manufacturers in most cases. We've lumped them into one thing here, but we hear we're a consumer brand, we are a CPG, we are in consumer durables, but it's usually not we're consumer manufacturer. But in the end, we know from working with folks in this space for a long time that they share more things that in common than they have that are different. So that's what's represented there in that consumer category, about 60%. And Stephen, I'd love your point of view. You've got a lot of industry experience. Why do you think it's so hard for us to define this consumer group under one umbrella?
Well, I think you just maybe mentioned one of them was even the desire for the manufacturer not to be identified as a manufacturer, right? Although many of them are successful because they differentiate in the quality of their products, I think they really want to tout their brand. But I think probably a more relevant reason is the changing nature of how they all go to market. I mean, many of them go to market in new ways almost every month, new channels, new propositions, marketplaces, direct to retailer or direct to consumer. So, and I think that's evolving. So just as we get people kind of segregated in our markets, identify who we believe our customer to be, that customer once again evolves or goes to market a different way or defines himself a different way. So I think it'd be interesting for the listeners as they hear this to look and see which pie slices they think they belong in and whether that's static or whether that's really in motion. I think many will find the very definitions are in motion right now.
Absolutely. I think evolution is a good word for it, and it will be something that will be a continuous theme throughout this presentation. So taking a quick look at who responded, line of business, you've got a good mix of folks from digital, IT, marketing, and product development, as well as some from in sales. There are folks who are heavily involved in PIM who are in sales from time to time. Usually it's more consuming than producing information, but it's an important demographic. And I love that we were able to get as many people from the C-suite as well as people who are hands-on keyboard working with product data throughout the study too. That's that graphic on the right. So quite a big slice of just different folks from across the spectrum, everything from charting, strategy, and vision all the way through actually using these tools. So I thought that was pretty important. And of course, one of the central findings to the whole study, explosion of multi-channel, and that shouldn't come as a surprise, I know, for most of the listeners who are here, but also just anyone who's gone and bought anything in the last 5 or 10 years. You can see on the left that on the consumer side, over 60% of consumer companies that are selling to consumers are selling through more than 3 channels, more than 3 channel types. And over half of industrial manufacturers are selling through more than 3 channel types as well. And why this is important is because a channel type is it's the largest type of segment we could do for the channels. So for the consumer side, a retailer would be a channel type. But what's important to remember is that if you're selling through Best Buy, say you're an electronics manufacturer, you're selling through Best Buy's got 1,000 stores across the country. Or you're selling through big box retail, or you're selling through independent retail. So each one of those channel type comes with a tremendous amount of complexity of where you need to get your product data from where you have it, which is hopefully in one place in your company, but out to all of those locations. So when you see 3, 4, 5, 6 or more channel types, you're typically looking at, in our experience, thousands upon thousands of places where the data needs to go. And on the industrial side, it's really not a lot different. Here's an interesting breakdown of what our respondents brought to us as far as where they were selling, what types of channels that they were selling. And, Stephen, I'm curious with your experience, if you believe that this channel distribution, you alluded to it a little bit just a moment ago, but are the number of channels accelerating from your point of view, both in terms of number and complexity, or are we seeing a slowdown anywhere?
Yeah, no, I think that there was always growth. I think actually use the word accelerate. I think the growth is accelerating, right? So if it was a curve, we're looking at a curve, we'd see the curve on an XY coordinate plane shifting upwards now. I think there's a number of reasons for that. One is that many companies were just kind of happy if they had a D2C site and they could say, I'm in the e-commerce world, but now we're getting to the point where that's not nearly enough, that you need to be in multiple marketplaces. You need to be in the retailers we mentioned before, and probably also have some type of DTC presence. And then don't forget social media, that Facebook and TikTok and all these other products are now selling in different channels, different user experiences, and all of these experiences expect different data for that buying context. So I think what we're seeing is the need to sell in more context with different data, and I think it's absolutely true that those are proliferating at accelerated rate.
I agree. It's not getting any easier, which I think is reflected in the next finding we have, where we asked the survey respondents, hey, what describes your current digital maturity? How is your organization growing its digital footprint in order to answer this complexity of these thousands of channels that are accelerating? And you can see, highlighted in red that 37% fall in that category of, hey, we're just getting started. We've got limited pockets. I love the phrase random pockets of digital maturity, or random acts of digital maturity, or we're assessing things. A fair amount of the group is saying they're at the very beginning stages of digital transformation. And there are some very big companies, some publicly traded companies, we'll talk about that in a minute, who have responded to this. I know that from being on site with a lot of different clients, we see that all the time where, it's often surprising the number of manual processes that are in place to try and cope with this channel complexity, with some household names. I won't name any, but this is a real challenge because the consumer and their preferences, as well as the B2B buyer and their preferences, are changing faster than companies are able to keep up. And I think that's the same is reflected with the next finding, where we asked, where is your digital maturity? Is it on par with your competition? And a full 45% were saying, we feel behind. We are behind our competition, either somewhat behind or very behind. With only about a third saying we're in the same place with them, and then a very small percentage, about 20%, saying that we feel like we're ahead. So you're at an 80-20 almost of digital maturity. And Salesforce just released their state of marketing report, and they had a very similar sentiment that came from thousands of respondents about their digital maturity too. So they're of course across a lot more industries than what we covered here, but it's interesting to see that throughout. And I'm wondering, do you think that, especially you're in charge, Stephen, of the product roadmap for Inriver, like directly creating features in the PIM to answer to the need for increasing digital maturity. Do you feel like anything from here is reflected in the requests for the roadmap, or how do you see that clients and people in the PIM community are bringing those requests to you with a sense of urgency?
Yeah. So one thing I'd note is whenever more than half are ahead of you, there's probably a perceptive bias, the grass being greener, because unless the people that are ahead are not responding to the survey, which I don't think is true, if people feel maybe a little more behind than they are. But I like the sense of urgency. I like the thrust of feeling you're a little behind so you stay urgent. But in terms of the impact on the roadmap, I think there's a couple layers of it. One is that on a roadmap, you're really showing customers where you're trying to go. Where am I going to be in a year? Where am I going to be 2 years? What's important to me? So they're trying to hook up not just with a certain technology or feature, but with a company that's going where they're going. So part of the roadmap is sort of painting the where we're going map, and not necessarily what you're shipping next quarter, but also important is what you're shipping. And so if our attendees today are being asked, well, what are you doing about AI? What's AI? What's AI got to do? There's pressure there sometimes to do it, but talking AI and doing AI are totally separate. So I think a lot of people want to see something on the roadmap that maybe has AI on it, great, but is it tangible? Can I prove it? Can I test it? Can I try it? Can I learn it as I go? And then the other element I'll mention, Andy, about digital transformation is the human element, right? You can bring all the technology that you want, but you have to have the people and the process to go with the technology. And I'd say as a blanket statement, most customers I've worked with over the last 2 decades underestimate the need to address the cultural and process issues. And somebody writes a check for some technology and kind of feels that that's going to fix things, and it'll only get so far. And I know you and I have seen that viscerally a number of times, even in the last few months together. So don't underestimate that cultural measurement of your company's digital maturity as you look at this model.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we mentioned, I'd like to spend just a moment on some of the answer to these complexities, because we've talked at a high level about, hey, it's PIM, it's DAM, it's PXM, and I know not everyone here has the exact same understanding of what that is. And part of the reason is that's because as old as this industry might be in Europe, at least in North America, it's still fairly new. And I know that Helen Grimster and others, she's with Gartner, and other analysts with other organizations have really worked hard to try and put together a unified view of what is digital maturity when it comes to product-focused companies. It's called PXM, it's called PIM, it's called a lot of different things. We'd like to spend a moment with the Gartner definition of what PXM is, and I'd love to get your perspective on how you see this view answering to the complexity that the survey uncovered for manufacturers.
Yeah, so first of all, we use this quite often, even internally, to kind of get a definition of PXM that can settle with us. I like this one because it recognizes the symbiotic nature of a DAM and a PIM, and the fact that there is some healthy overlap between those two platforms, and that to go beyond a traditional notion of PIM, there are these peripheral activities you see in here: syndication, channel integration, personalization, that are important to the success of a PIM and a DAM combo. In other words, are we actually lifting sales? Can we measure that in a meaningful way? Can we build an ROI to our management? And I think sometimes management doesn't always just want to know, yeah, we got a DAM, we got a PIM, but what are you doing to take that PIM and that DAM to the edge, to your consumer, and build an experience that differentiates our company? So I agree with this kind of circular, or I say elliptical view, and then we try to make sure we're tackling those areas on the outside just as vehemently as we're working on the inside of the PIM. Because as you're saying, Andy, the PIM has evolved from a more of a data-driven, almost an MDM type of a nature, to looking outward to what are we actually doing to lift sales for a consumer or for a B2B site.
I think that's well said. And I'll add to it, I think that this chart is great. I do think it's very technology focused. And one of the things that we always want to return to is the two human beings on either side of the transaction. The people who are working for the company that has to navigate all of these systems, which are increasingly fragmented, right? Where people are buying more and more specialized systems and hooking them together. That's part of the Mach Alliance and the principles of a microservices architecture. It makes sense, but it can make for a disjointed user experience on the company side. And then similarly, the buyer, the buyer, and I always like to go back to us as individuals, either as a consumer or when we buy in business. We don't care what the tech stack looks like in the back end. We just want to be able to use the channel that we want to use at the time we want to use it, and we want the product information to be accurate and to engender a sense of trust that I'm getting what I'm supposed to be getting when I buy this. So I feel like the piece that's might be missing from this is just that human side on either side, that research can help uncover the preferences on the consumer side, but you need a different approach on the user side. It's actually a similar approach, but a different audience to determine what's the UI and what is the experience like for those folks who are actually managing content on the inside of an organization. I know it's been a big topic for us as we've gone on site to several clients since the PIMpoint organization meetings.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Right.
Maybe one example there, search. So you need great search to make a DAM or PIM work internally, but then think about from the consumer view, as you're talking, Andy, about optimizing search from a consumer perspective and integrating a searchandising engine or best in breed search with all the data. That adds a new layer of complexity. As you mentioned, the MarTech stack, there's 4,000 solutions and growing. So it's quite a lot for our audience here to get their head around and make a concrete recommendation to their team.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of emails that go out every day of, which solution I need today. But in the end, it's the vision the vision trumps the individual solutions. The solutions have to be competent to meet that vision. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. So I mentioned, and for those in the audience who have maybe gone to check email because you've seen the first couple of slides in this report, because you were at PIMpoint, I'd invite you to come back because we are going to talk about something new that we didn't discuss from the main stage. And Stephen's alluded to it a couple of times, but that's the idea of ROI. Because this study uncovered something really, really interesting and really important. We asked these questions from your perspective. Does your organization understand the value of having a PIM or a DAM to meet this multi-channel challenge? And this is one of the reasons I love research. We've been doing it for a long time. I've been involved in a lot of these projects. Is you ask the same question multiple ways, and you'll find out what people really mean a lot of times. So if you look here, this is a dream to see this kind of positive response. That absolutely, you look at the PIM one at first. I mean, you're talking like 80%, 90% have some understanding to a very good understanding of what the value is of having a PIM, and the numbers are even higher for the DAM. So we got this response, and we got this in several other questions too, where people are saying, absolutely, I understand the value of these systems for managing complexity, and so does my organization. And then several questions later, we asked them, well, what's your ROI? What return on the investment from these things that you found so much value in have you seen? And remember, this is controversial because we implement, this is the majority of our work as systems integrators. We are integrating these systems. And what came back was a very different message, with a much smaller percentage on both systems saying that they saw an ROI within the first couple of years. And the vast majority, or the plurality of respondents saying, we have not realized a return, or we are not sure. Which is pretty striking to me. And, there's a difference between saying, do you recognize the value and do you see an ROI? But how do we make sense of this, Stephen? How do you see this as a CPO and as someone who's got such broad experience in the industry?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is setting the expectations prior to the purchase. So it's one thing to say, yeah, we kind of need a PIM or we need a DAM and we know what they do, and so we got to go buy one. It's almost a compelled purchase. That's what just people do. So they buy these things. And then if you put it in and then try to measure ROI going forward, it's nearly impossible because you have no baseline. You have to have a baseline to establish an ROI. So I think it would be a buying process that was mature enough to recognize ahead of the purchase where the gaps or the pain points were, and which of those could be measured in numbers. Some of those pain points are very hard to pin down on a spreadsheet, but everybody would agree in the hallway at the water cooler that they're there. For example, in DAM, it's often about a reuse of assets, the effective searching and finding of an asset, the understanding of it from a legal perspective. So for example, if it has a model in it, am I licensed to use it? What markets can I use it in? All the DRM around it. And then once that's recognized, the actual human behavior to decide, should I do a new photo shoot today, or should I go into the DAM and look for something that would work? And I think a lot of agencies and marketing departments would probably prefer the photo shoot because that's what they were trained to do. That's what they love to do. But the ROI often comes from doing the opposite and trying to get something that's 90% good, but costs 90% less. So I think driving some of the human behavior around both PIM and DAM use is important. And I think, Andy, we have to look at ourselves. Is our product built to help clients build an ROI as you go? I did a deployment one time, and the whole deployment was dependent on me building an ROI calculator into the platform. So you go to a little report and see how many assets were reused, how many did we avoid. So it was the type of thinking of that customer drove me to think about that sort of real-time collection of data instead of after 6 months going, oh, we were supposed to do an ROI. We better go gather some data pretty quick because we got that meeting next week. If you're doing that, very hard to catch up.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. We've all been a part of programs like that. And it reminds me of other consumer or research we've done for consumer brands, where it's difficult to calculate the return on something that isn't seen as an investment from the start. It's seen as we call it a grudge purchase, something that has to be bought to solve a particular challenge. So for consumer, for a lot of us, it's putting tires on our car, unless we're driving a performance vehicle and we know what the benefits are. A lot of times it's just, I got to get new tires on my minivan. And as mundane as that is, I think sometimes these projects are approached this way of we've got to alleviate the pain of our individuals who are struggling to cope with these channels rather than elevating the conversation to let's talk about all the things we can do with this once that pain is alleviated. You don't ignore that because it's got to be done. But
Yes.
it has to start at the outset with that mindset, or you're not going to be able to get to a place where you can calculate it. But there's a lot here that we want to explore in our next version of the study, which we will publish next year. We want to really dig into this ROI for that very reason.
Yeah, one more example, it really also has to do with marketing, in particular, wanting to reuse assets, understanding the value of speed to market and getting that buy-in ahead of time. I was with one pet food company, and the CMO said, if I pay for one more golden retriever bounding across a field of daisies to his dish, I'm going to freak out. I think he felt he actually, it was a she had shot 9 of them in 2 years. And so, there's a cultural aspect, as we mentioned, to achieving the ROI.
Absolutely. Well, let's, in the interest of time, we're going to move forward to a couple of the other findings here. And I think keeping this ROI piece in mind when we look at some of these other core questions is really important. We always like to at Ntara, one of the tenets we have is, we're business people first when we come into an organization, even though we're solving technical problems. We did ask the question about how subjectively individuals would rate their company's financial performance in the past year. You can see that in general, 2023 was seen as a pretty positive year for manufacturers, both on the consumer and the business side. These were results that were pretty consistent across both of those demographics, which is pretty cool. And when we looked at asking the question of, well, how does your digital maturity, when we cross their answers about digital maturity with their report on digital financial performance, we came across this finding that if a company self-reported it had high digital maturity, it was 29% more likely to cite that it had better financial performance in the previous year. So it's really, it's an observational study, but it does point very strongly to the fact that we know we need technology to solve the problems that the multi-channel market is presenting to us. But when we're getting back to that question of ROI, of course, one of the most important questions, and we've skirted around it a little here, or talked around it a little bit, is why are you putting in a PIM or a DAM or a PXM solution to begin with? And finding out that motivation, that attitudinal quantity, is something we were very interested in with the study. And when we asked both companies who have a PIM and who have a DAM, because there were those who responded that didn't, hey, why did you put this in place? What was your motivation? Was it just that acute pain of hey, I've got all this stuff in spreadsheets in the story we all know, or was there a bigger narrative around it? We came back with this laundry list of reasons, which were actually pretty similar across both platforms. And our analysts took a step back and said, let's take a look at what might make these a little bit different from each other. How can we segment their responses? And what they hypothesized was that we've got some of these that are more tactical concerns, more foundational concerns like process efficiency, increasing automation, making the product data more organized on the PIM side, reducing human error and those types of things as well on the DAM side. But then there are those things that are different, that aren't about solving the problems of today. They're about moving the organization forward. And those are the items in blue. And what we've dubbed advanced reasons, or advanced PIM users and advanced DAM users for having both of those systems in place. So were you putting the system in not just to solve an immediate problem, but to help propel the organization forward with enhanced marketing capacity and for PIM syndication, so getting all of that data out to all those different channels. And then on the DAM side, similarly, enhance their marketing capacity. Asset reuse is another key component of that. Syndication, getting the data out to different places. And then rights and licensing management, which you touched on earlier, Stephen, that we know that at the Henry Stewart DAM conference, Coca-Cola cited that they went from 1% asset reuse across all of their advertising creative to 25% asset reuse once they had a global DAM in place, which is a process that took them a couple of years. So that's the way you do it, but you've got to have that mindset from the outset. So the bombshell that came out of this report is when we crossed the self-reported financial performance against these reasons for putting the technology in place, we came up with some pretty amazing results. So even more so than overall digital maturity, If they cited one of these advanced reasons for putting a PIM in place, they were 39% more likely to end up in reporting positive or very positive financial performance. And on the dam side, 36% more likely to report positive or very positive financial performance. So, as a product guy and someone with a foot in both the PIM and the dam world, I'd love to get your point of view on this, Stephen, and what you think it takes. Does this make sense? Was this surprising to you?
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. I think that if you think about the disciplines that you had on the preceding slide, most of them were about inbound or inward looking efficiencies, cost cutting, FTEs, maybe internal automation. But if you looked at the more advanced users, they're thinking about broadcasting, syndication, messaging, here license rights and licensing management. It's a more elevated, advanced approach to communication with your consumer. And so by no accident, those who are looking at the outbound power of the PIM rather than using it as an internal workflow tool to move things, from one department to another, get them approved. Not that it's not important, but it isn't an outward thrust of great messaging. And so the companies that are worried about that, they're thinking PXM as much as PIM, and they're thinking about what's their end consumer's experience. And by no accident, they're going to be more successful. I think that's true in DAM and PIM.
Absolutely. We were on site last month with a shared client, and one of the things that really impressed me about their leadership is they were very, very focused on their end customer. It was a consumer products manufacturer, and there were several times in different meetings when they would just turn around and redirect their teams of like, yeah, that's a great idea, but that's not what our end user cares about. And I think having that type of customer centricity, if you'll forgive the overused term, but having that level of customer centricity from the top down in leadership, I think is a key ingredient in making this work with the technology and making it, result in an experience that's worth paying more money for when you're either a consumer or a buyer.
Yeah, maybe even a slight enhancement on what you said, Andy. Not only was the comment, hey, our customers don't really care about that, but sometimes it was, how do we know our customers don't care about that or do? Let's go find out. And they had a very active way to helicopter themselves down in with the client and find out.
That's a great addition, great point. Well, we're just about to round out our time here, but we want to cover just a couple of more things, including that exciting generative AI example. So we did ask the groups, hey, what do you see as your biggest opportunity? We asked them to look to the future, not just for today, but going forward. What's the biggest opportunity for how you bring products to market? And for both the consumer and industrial manufacturers, they cited three things that really came to the top: improving data analytics, multi-channel syndication, which is cool to see because that's an advanced usage of PIM. So was great to see that. And then improving the user experience. So I'm curious, Stephen, do you agree with these from what you're seeing, and how are you looking at making adaptations on the product side to address these rising concerns about bringing products to market?
Yeah. So basically, I do agree. It's hard to disagree with a survey of 130 go, they don't know what they're talking about. So I think I try to figure out, well, why did they say that? And is there a deeper insight here? And so I think improving multi-channel syndication stands out to me because I get a lot of conversations about it. And I think rather than just did the customer put it in the cart, it's like, how can I be more involved in cross-sells and upsells? How can I get a larger cart? How can I get more throughput? How can I manage with my same staff more data and more channels? And I think that's just coming up constantly right now. On the user experience, the PIM, if we talk about PXM, we're not talking about the experience that you have in the PIM or in the DAM. We're talking about the PIM and the DAM being tools to allow the buyer of that tool to offer the consumer or the buyer in a B2B scenario a better experience. So we're a little bit removed from directly pushing that user experience. But if you think about, well, data, what brands do I like and which ones don't I like? The ones where I get really inconsistent data, different specs, or the ad has a different price, and I log in and the offer I just saw in the ad isn't even mentioned. The miscommunication. So a lot of the improving user experience is consistent data and consistent offerings across touch points? Does the billboard match the radio ad, match the in-store signage, match the e-commerce site? And many of you on this phone know what a intense task that is to get those to align, but there's also tremendous brand power when you do it. When you look at a band, you buy something like, yeah, that was pretty slick. I heard about that here. I saw it there, and now I'm in the store, and here it is. It kind of catches your attention because I think it's a little bit the exception rather than the rule right now. That's why we're probably here.
Absolutely. I was just looking for some paper coffee filters on Amazon, and it has a new category that says material on it. And I was specifically looking for compostable paper, and the first three results that came up that said material, plastic, material, metal. I'm like, what's going on? And everybody's got stories like that. So
yes.
I like that. Now, when we were preparing for this, we did have some disagreements about the bottom item on here, the use of AI generated content. And it's the most hyped thing. It's hope everyone bought Nvidia stock when they could. Maybe you still should. I don't know, but it wasn't rising to the top. It was obviously something of concern for consumer and industrial manufacturers. But we often find that people are saying, "Hey, that's cool, but we're trying to solve foundational problems with our data before we get to there." And before we show this really cool example of a client who's doing more, I'm curious about your point of view on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think AI just got so much hype that I think it almost dulled our ears to what the real opportunities are. And also, we saw a lot of companies that just went and got a data scientist. Thought, well, they know AI, they'll drop in, they'll look at this, they'll bring something. But it's really about identifying the right opportunities for the type of AI that's available right now. We at inriver have found generative AI to probably have the most lift, but maybe in some unexpected places. So one of the areas of generative AI is in product description, the creation of accurate and compelling product descriptions. And so if you have a hero product you're launching, you probably already have a marketing team who's really good at building those descriptions. We found some clients that maybe had a long tail assortment or descriptions that hadn't gotten any love or hadn't been rewritten since they got new attributes and product data. Or an example I mentioned to you the other day, Andy, was using product photography, using AI to pull data out of the photography and then using that data to enhance a generative description. And so we have some real customers, Jordan Forms and others, that have spoken at meetings and will say, I got X% of lift on SEO and X% of lift in sales using AI. And I think that's what people really want to know. So I think the reason it's low here is because there's just a lot of BS in the market and there's a lot of puff and smoke and not that much reality. So I would say to anybody, don't discount AI, but be very suspect of claims and get people that will show you how you can take your data and make your descriptions read so that you are compelled by them. Because other than that, it's just all a waste of time. Are the descriptions great? Do they sell product or not? Can they be tweaked? It's a little bit hardcore, but my view is it probably fell down because of the hype.
I think that's well said. It probably comes back to that idea of a vision and what are you setting out to do with Gen AI? I think most people have at this point interfaced with ChatGPT at some point and been like, hey, write me an email or come up with a product name or something like that. And if I may, I think that's about as elementary as saying, well, I want to organize my product data better, so I'm going to put in a PIM. It's not focused on a unique end case, that it's applying technology just to apply technology and see what it can do. And we have a shared client that we'd like to show an example from who's doing the opposite of that. They started out with a vision that is really, really interesting and built something that's, of course, in beta. It's always in beta, that is worth showing to this group of attendees who are in the manufacturing space. So this will be the last thing that we talk about today. But furniture.com, I've mentioned, is a shared client. And this is a public website. Everybody can go to that today if you'd like. But they are an aggregator of furniture from all over the web. And so they have hundreds of thousands of SKUs that are for all kinds of different furniture. But they have a search that is powered by AI. And it's doing more than just auto-completing and boost and burying and searchandising and that type of thing. This is really a novel use. If you are searching for something, and I'm going to say I've got a daughter, I want to look for a princess chair. These are the results that are coming up from the direct product data. Now, when you've got hundreds of thousands of SKUs and you're an aggregator like furniture.com, you're really at the mercy of the data that's coming from various places. They do a lot to enhance it too, but there's a literal interpretation of, well, what's a princess chair? It's a chair that's got princesses on it. But they've also incorporated generative AI, which will take what is really referred to as the searcher's intent of what they're looking for and generate something that is seeking to match that intent rather than a literal product. So you see the example here of a princess chair. You got one with princesses literally on it, or you've got one that Gen AI created that looks, like something pretty regal and interesting. It's very different from the other results that show up just based on the product data. And you can go in and take a look at this generative AI created image, and then it is matching using AI again to match this made up image to real products that will get you closer to what you were looking for to begin with. This is in beta. There are other examples that I can show that are really cool, but I'd encourage everybody to take a look at this. And you bet, after talking with them and spending so much time with them, this wasn't started out as let's get some chair descriptions that are written. This started with a vision, with an advanced vision of what they wanted to do to bring more value to the searcher than just simply deploy technology. So I think that's a really exciting thing that we've been able to.
Yeah, maybe one distinguishing feature there. So a lot of AI, including ours at inriver, is based on large language model learning. In other words, a model that's already been trained with billions of data points. This particular company took their own data and spent a long time training their own model, and they got a tremendous amount of value out of it. But it's a very different discipline to build and train your own AI model than to leverage LLM. So a starting point is to leverage LLM, but then you see furniture.com said that's not enough. We're actually going to invest and have a vision and build something off our own model. Very ambitious, but I thought great results, really interesting results.
Definitely. I think they're definitely in the 0.5% of clients in this space, but I think we're going to see that percentage grow of companies who take advantage of this and think of novel ways to use it. So, all right, we are just about out of time. We wanted to leave enough time for questions at the end, but to sum everything up that we have discussed, the research report clearly shows the rise of multi-channel. It's a pain we're all feeling. It's also a huge opportunity. That PXM is the solution for meeting the need of multi-channel demand and ensuring that a buyer's experience is consistent across all their channels, and that companies who are customer-centric and product-led, who are coming at things with a vision of making their end users and buyers' lives better, not just deploying technology, are reaping significant financial rewards and are far ahead of the competition. So that is, just the tip of the iceberg of what the study has. I did mention that we are going to, I'm going to throw up a link here so that people can download the study. And of course, at this time, we'd welcome any questions that anybody has from the audience. Would love to answer those for you, either about the study, about PIM, DAM, or anything that you might be interested in. Here's a link to the study. All right, we'll make sure I'm in the right chat window for the questions.
Yeah, there is a question. Any advice for managing up to make an organization more strategic about digital commerce?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's an interesting one. We've seen this a lot, right? You got someone who is in the tech and they know they can do more. And I think in my mind, so much of this comes down to understanding the expectations and what your boss is measured by, and finding a way to relate the vision that you have for the tech to both the mission of the company for its buyers and end users, as well as directly, what does management need to see? But I think having data like this, having data like you have in the study that points very clearly to better returns for a more advanced point of view is a big start, because data will convince people in a way that, just saying, hey, we need to do this, we're seeing it everywhere. It rarely does, in my experience.
Yeah, maybe one more point there on managing up that I've learned through the years, having tried to practice managing up and had it practice on me, I might mention, is looking for an event. So a lot of executive changes are driven by some event that you take advantage of, often that it occurs in the external world. So, for example, if I know security is important and I'm really passionate about it, I'm worried that somebody's hacking my network, I can talk about it and talk about it, but if it doesn't happen, people are like, yeah, yeah, we'll see. But when some competitor or somebody in industry's hacked and the CEO winds up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, that's an event. And you say, you don't want that to be you. Look at that, that headshot on the Wall Street Journal. That's kind of a simplified example, but look for a competitor stumble in an area that you want to improve to say, look what they did, or look for competitor success and say, look, this is something they're doing. That the competitive nature of humans sometimes excites people, I think, particularly at the executive level, or a gap in process. I know one of my clients was not worried about cross-slicing of images until they accidentally printed a Disney image on a few 100,000 products and got a giant fine. And believe me, that was an event, and it created an ROI. And there was a lot of investment in tracking what did they use of Disney, when, where, and how. But until that event occurred, there was no movement. So I'm always looking for that event.
Absolutely. It's the old adage of show me, don't tell me. I think the more examples you can show, both that combination of data and those anecdotes that illustrate either the threat or the opportunity are key things that anyone needs to see in order to make a decision.
Yeah, and
But
act on it quick. The hype of an event is about a 2 week window. And by the third or fourth week, it's gone. You have to wait for another event. So be ready to strike and strike while the event is hot.
I wish my birthday carried a 2 week hype window around it. I could use that, I think. Maybe
Yes.
Father's Day would be great too. Um, all right, it looks like we are just about out of time. We do not have any more questions in the pipeline, so I think that it's time to wrap, and we'll make a recording of this available. But please do feel free, if you have not downloaded the report, we'd love to make that available to you. And Stephen, thank you so much for spending the time with us today to offer your perspective and expertise around these findings. And we're looking forward to working with you further on helping to find the right solutions to all of our customers' challenges.
Sure. I appreciate all the people that hung all the way through. It had a good retention right here, and we'd love to hear from you. There's many of you online now. What would you like to hear? What other webinar? What other maybe side topic that we've discussed would be of interest to you? We want to make sure we're hitting the mark and understanding our customer really, which is our listeners right now.
Well said. All right. Well, thanks everyone for your
Thanks so
time
much.
today. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you soon.